Good evening to you all, and welcome to the Monday, November 26, 2018 meeting of the Falls Church City Council. We are delighted you are here with us this evening. I'm going to do something a little bit out of the ordinary tonight as relates to the Pledge of Allegiance. We have a new Boy Scout troop that's been organized here in the City of Falls Church. It's Troop 1996 and is sponsored by the National Sheriff's Association and will be a model to create 300 new Boy Scout troops around the country aligned with sheriff's offices. And so Troop 1996 is going to meet every Monday night at 7:30 when school is in session at MEH Middle School. We have a large contingent of that troop right here with us this evening, so we are delighted to have you with us. We'd like to congratulate you on your formation. I have a flag I'd like to present to you shortly, but first I'd ask that your troop come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would be so kind. You guys willing to do that tonight?
Y'all kind of gather around the microphone, we'll pick you up.
All right, when you're ready, why don't you point up to us? The flag is right here in the corner.
Daniel, that's you.
Oh, there's one there too. All right, so there's two flags. All right, when you guys are ready, let's do it. You all ready?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, come on forward, guys. We're going to give you that flag we mentioned.
Daniel,
Chad
take
Fulgham,
it.
are you around here too? Come on up, bring your troop leaders. Everybody, come on forward. We got this flag. Would you guys like some pins too? Some Falls Church City pins? All right, let's do it, guys. You're going to hold, yeah, let's see. There we go. All right, here's one for you. One for you. You. How about you? You want one too? All right, there you go. All right, how about you? All right. Okay. Got another little hand sticking in here. There we go. All right. How about you? All right, okay, stick around. We're going to get a picture. Anyone else? Did anyone not get a pin? Oh, sorry, guy. Anybody else miss out on a pin? Okay, there's one for you. And how about you? Did you get one too? All right, you guys want to turn around? I want to go ahead and present this flag to your leaders. Chad, if you like to do the honors, congratulations. Absolutely, let's do it. Why don't we all come around? The rest of the city council want to come around? We're going to get a picture.
Okay, Boy Scouts. Squeeze in. You're a loving troop. There we go. Get close. Get close. Okay. Yes, I'm on the camera. Sorry. All right. There we go. Hold on. Yeah. Scooch this. Great job, guys. Okay. Councilman Z, can you just come a little bit? Stand. There we go. All right. Just say cheese a bunch of times. Okay, a bunch of times. Yay! Great, thank you. Oh, you're fine. Yay!
Thanks, guys. Nice work. Congratulations. Awesome job. Thanks for you all up here. All right, thank you guys. Congratulations. Look forward to seeing you all and lots of merit badges.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I'd just say one word,
of course.
please. Well, more than one word. I just want to congratulate you guys. I was an Eagle Scout at Troop 367 in Birmingham, Alabama, and I will tell you, for those of you guys that are just starting your journey in Scout, some of my best memories growing up were hiking, camping, learning a lot of the skills that I did moving up through the ranks in the Scout program. So I urge all of you guys to stick with it through Eagle. It's a very rewarding program, very rewarding journey, and really, really proud to see this come to fruition here in Falls Church. So congratulations to you guys, and good luck on your journey to become Eagle.
Yes. Ms. Conley? Here. Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Here.
Mr. Snyder? Mr. Z?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter.
Here.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. And let's go on to the meeting agenda. Is there anyone who'd like to make a motion regarding tonight's agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt tonight's meeting agenda.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the ayes have it. We have a proclamation this evening, and I'm not sure there's anyone here tonight from Brown's Hardware, but we have a proclamation regarding Hugh Brown. And I understand, unfortunately, some of the folks from Brown's Hardware weren't able to make it with us tonight, but there is a memorial service coming up on, do we know the exact date?
It's actually on the 8th, and that's the day that we're declaring Hugh Brown Day.
Okay,
On the
great.
same day as the memorial.
And there'll be a whole lot of folks, I'm sure, there for that day, and
Yes.
this proclamation may be read again at that point. But I guess I'm going to go ahead and do the honors then tonight. This is a proclamation regarding a cherished citizen that I think many of you knew, certainly were familiar with, Hugh Brown, who passed away recently. Whereas the community lost a cherished citizen with the passing of Hugh Brown on November 5th, 2018. Whereas Mr. Brown was a lifelong resident of Falls Church who attended Madison Elementary School and Jefferson High School. Whereas Hugh Brown was the owner of Brown's Hardware Store, which was opened in 1883 by his grandfather, J.W. Brown. Whereas Mr. Brown continued operating the store in the same community-spirited tradition as his grandfather and father. And whereas Brown's Hardware remains a cornerstone of the city's downtown business district and a classic American hardware store amidst a world of big box retailers and online stores. Whereas Hugh Brown's legacy will be continued through the contributions that Brown's Hardware makes to the fabric of life in the city of Falls Church. Whereas Mr. Brown was known as a kind and generous man and a strong supporter of the city of Falls Church. Whereas the City Council wishes to express condolences to the family and friends of Hugh Brown and also celebrate his well-lived life. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby recognize Saturday, December 8th, 2018 as Hugh Brown Day in the City of Falls Church and encourage all citizens to honor the memory of Mr. Brown on that day. Okay, I don't think there's anyone here this evening of Mr. Brown's relations or from the store at the present time, but
I'll make sure that they receive it before the service.
that'd be great. And we'd love to spend some more time with them and hope they can come up and join us at council and share some special memories of his life with us. So, all right. Let's go on then to oaths of office. Are there any oaths of office to administer tonight?
No, we are up to date on those.
That sounds great. All right, we're going to move on to receipt of public comment. Are there any written comments that you would like to share with us, Madam
sir.
Clerk? No, sir? All right. So now we're going to move on to public comments. Those of you who wish to speak tonight, you can either speak now or you can speak when the item that you're interested in is heard. I'm going to call your name and ask that you come forward to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and keep your comments to 3 minutes if you'd be so kind. Our first speaker is Allison Brown. Welcome to you, followed by Margaret Schwartz. Welcome.
I'm Allison Brown, a resident of the City of Falls Church, 706 Poplar Drive. I've lived here for 13 years, and I'm here tonight to encourage you to pass the ordinance that will provide a few additional gun controls for the City of Falls Church. I encourage you to pass the ordinance so that we can make it unlawful to transport a loaded shotgun or rifle within the city, and the other provisions that you're considering. It's a small step, but I understand that we're limited by state law in terms of what the City of Falls Church can do. So I urge you to do everything in your power to advance gun control in the City of Falls Church. So, please consider my comments and the other comments from the group Moms Demand Action and pass the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Margaret Schwartz, followed by Kate Morrison.
Good evening. I'm Margaret Schwartz, a resident of the City of Falls Church at 313 Lincoln Avenue. I'd like to speak tonight my recent experience applying for a job through the city, as well as the responsiveness of messages that I've left for city employees. I found myself out of work this summer and applied for several jobs in the city. After getting no response, I physically went to the temporary city offices and was told by the HR person that the communication system in that building was so bad that they were never getting any messages or emails, and my applications had not been received by this person. So after I submitted them directly to her, she acknowledged that they were received. I did not hear anything back. After a week or two, I emailed her and she said that the applications were sent to the hiring manager, after which I received no message at all. And I don't think that this is a good way for applicants to be communicated to by the city when they apply for a job across the board. I think the HR department needs to revamp their way of communicating with job applicants and do a better job of letting people know the status of their applications. I'd also like to say that I feel like every time I call someone in the city, a department, I get an answering machine. I know people are busy, but it's one thing to leave a message, it's another thing to never get a response back. I was trying to get a hold of Deborah G. Regarding the Historical Commission because I need to apply for some changes. I got an email back that she was out of the office for an indefinite period of time and gave several phone numbers of departments, no contact people. I left a message for the Department of Public Works on Friday, November the 16th, which was a little over a week ago, and given that, yes, it was a holiday week last week, but to date, no one has called me back, and this is not an unusual experience. It's very frustrating to have to call people time and time again and feel like you're being dropped into a void. So I would encourage the city to review their process of how they respond to citizen calls and make some changes so that citizens don't feel like they are left out in the cold and have to keep responding back to the employee to get an answer.
All right, thank you. I'm certainly very sorry to hear about your experiences with the city, and I think we're going to try to do better. I don't know, Mr. Shields, do you have anything that you'd like to say at this point?
Well, I appreciate your being here tonight, and I take your comments to heart. I will follow up with you personally just to discuss your experience, but also discuss that with our staff just about how our system is working right now or not working. It is true that in our temporary headquarters, we've had big struggles with the phone system there. But nonetheless, I'm sorry that you've had this experience. I do want to follow up with you and see if we can do better.
Great.
Mr. Shields, if you could follow up with council as well, I think we'd all like to hear what's going on with this. Our next speaker is Kate Morrison, followed by Chris Gregory. Welcome.
Hi. This is my first council meeting, but I have been to many birthday parties in this room, as I'm sure you guys have, the kids growing up. My name is Kate Morrison, and I'm a resident of Falls Church City at 122 West Cameron Road, a mom to an 8-year-old and 2-year-old, and most importantly tonight, a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Our local McLean Vienna Falls Church group would like to thank Councilmember Hardy, the full council, and Chief Gavin for your work to date to update the weapons ordinance in Falls Church City. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. In addition to our broad overall support and offer of thanks for updating the city code, I wanted to offer a few specific comments on the new proposed sections on transporting loaded weapons and the section on unclaimed firearms. We agree it should be unlawful for any person to transport, possess, or carry a loaded shotgun or loaded rifle in a vehicle or on any public street in the city. As someone new to reviewing the city code, the proposed language at first read appears to have left out loaded pistols or handguns. Most people aren't reading the proposed city code next to the existing state code to see what's already covered at the state level and therefore not included in this draft ordinance. So as communication materials are developed for the public on this issue, clarity on the fact that handguns are already covered through Virginia state law would be helpful, among other examples where that's relevant. There's reduced gun violence in places where weapons are locked and unloaded. We encourage this section to be amended to include that loaded shotguns and rifles should also be locked and safely secured as an additional measure. We're pleased to see the council's commitment to destroy unclaimed firearms, but discourage further consideration of the public sale provision in this section. The self-described mission of the Falls Church Police Department is to provide a safe environment for all citizens to work and live in by protecting life, property, and preserving peace within the community. The sale of firearms falls outside of this remit. In addition, related insufficiencies in background check processes add further complications to such a process being carried out in a safe manner. We recognize that the City of Falls Church can only go so far and understand the unfortunate limitations of Dillon's rule. And we look forward to working through our supporters to suggest further statewide measures to promote gun safety through our delegates in Richmond. Thank you again for your work on this important issue. Our local group of Moms Demand Action looks forward to continue to work with you in the future to ensure that our city code remains up to date and offers the strongest allowable protections for our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Chris Gregory, followed by Eric Pelton. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Chris Gregory. I'm from Fairfax County. My address is 6816 Crutchfield Street, and I do have Falls Church in it. So I'm here this evening to announce that the Stop Gun Violence license plate may be purchased from the DMV, both on the bus and at any of the local DMV offices. And I wanted to give a special thank you to Delegate Marcus Simon, who carried the bill HB 287 and got it through the House of Delegates, and with the help of Senator Adam Ebbin through the State Senate for Governor Northam's signature earlier this year. So it is available this is our personal plate. It is a standard plate. You can also, if you wish to personalize a plate, you can do that too. So thank you so much, and please consider getting a Stop Gun Violence license plate for your next vehicle. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. And our last speaker is Eric Pelton. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Eric Pelton. I live at 303 North Oak Street. I'm here tonight to speak briefly and to thank you for taking action for gun safety. While I am a member of the local chapter of Moms Demand Action, because not only moms, but dads, grandparents, children, and others demand action as well, I speak tonight for myself. I also speak for my family, including my 11 and 13-year-old children, who are very passionate and concerned about these issues, and who can't believe they have to witness unspeakable acts of gun violence on the news at schools across this country, and who have had to decide whether to walk out of classes in order to support protests advocating for gun control reform, and who have had to endure countless lockdown drills in our schools because gun violence is all too real of a threat everywhere, even in our community. In fact, just tonight over dinner a few minutes ago, my son told me they do the lockdown drill once every quarter, which, if he's correct, means that as an 8th grader, he's done over 30 lockdown drills in Falls Church schools. Any measure of common sense gun control, no matter how small, is a step in the right direction and could save lives. Our nation and our communities have experienced far too many gun tragedies in homes, in offices, in schools, and in the streets. Any step in the right direction is a welcome one. I believe the proposed ordinance language is a step in the right direction. I support the measure proposed to regulate the transport of loaded rifles and shotguns to the fullest extent permitted by the state laws. I support the measure to destroy unclaimed firearms generally. It is my understanding that the city police policy is not to resell any such weapons, so perhaps the language could be revisited and amended to remove the option for such a sale. Putting weapons that were used in a crime or otherwise confiscated by police back on the streets is not my idea of promoting a safe community. I realize that additional measures are often hampered in Virginia by the Dillon Rule, which I studied long ago in law school and forgot long ago. But I am thankful for our state representatives, especially Marcus Simon, for his work to advocate for common sense gun control measures. I urge the city, as the upcoming state legislative session in Richmond approaches, to continue to advocate for greater local authority over gun regulations and for statewide measures to promote gun safety, gun education, mental health funding and support, and much more. For example, perhaps the code section 15.2-915.2, regulating the transport of loaded rifles or shotguns, could increase the fine to perhaps $500 or $1,000 at the state level. Thank you for your efforts and your time.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Appreciate your service on the EDA as well. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at this point? If not, we're going to move on. You will have an opportunity when the item's called if you would like to wait. Are there any council requests? Anyone in council have any requests? Vice Mayor Connolly?
Ms. Mester, I'm just wondering about our legislative package. That comes at our next meeting next week?
I'm working on drafting it now. It'll be before council for December 10th action, and I hope to have it at work session with a preliminary conversation with your legislative committee, Mr.
Okay.
Schneider and Mr. Duncan.
Okay, thanks.
Any other council requests? We did just come from the lighting of the trees, which was an excellent event. I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to come down, but our clerk, Celeste Heath, did a great job organizing that. I know she had a lot of help, Veronica Prince and some others. But anyway, it was a great event, and I hope you all will join us next year. But it was well done, so thank you much for your work in putting it together. Is there any other council comments, requests, or should we move on to the report of the city manager?
Mr. Mayor, I was just hoping to get hopefully an update on a couple of the development projects around town, specifically Founders Row, as well as an
Okay.
update on Broad and Washington. It doesn't have to happen tonight, but just to put that on the agenda.
If you know anything during your report, maybe you could mention it. If not,
Great, thanks.
all right. Well, why don't we move on to Mr. Shields?
Well, what I wanted to report on tonight is to provide the council with an update on the downtown plaza. But before I get to that, I can just briefly touch on this question and also just make a note of some awards that that city businesses or city projects were awarded for at a recent event. First, with respect to Founders Row, I can get back with council on a more definitive schedule. But they have been going through the permitting process with the city. A couple of key things that have happened in the last 2 weeks is that a construction management plan has been approved, which regulates the truck traffic, the loading, unloading, access to the site for the approximately 3 years of construction that are anticipated for the Founders Row project. Easements for stormwater facilities and other infrastructure, those have all been worked through the process, and it is our understanding that the developer is getting very close to being able to have visible signs of progress on the site. But I don't know the exact date that's going to start, but I believe it to be imminent. But I can provide a more detailed written schedule. Second, the two recently completed projects in the city were recognized by NAIOP, which is the Commercial Real Estate Development Association, for excellence in design. One for creative reuse is their award, which granted for Northside Social. And I should note also that for the DC area, the Capital Region, they gave 31 awards, and 2 of them were for projects in the city of Falls Church. So the first one was for the Northside Social, for the reuse of what is one of the oldest structures in the city for its current use as a cafe and restaurant. The Lincoln at Tenor Hill project was given its Excellence in Design Award, and particularly for the streetscape work that celebrates the history of Tenor Hill, the first rural branch of the NAACP, and all of the that local history that they captured, which culminates up in the arch, the Tenor Hill Arch at the top of the hill. And so it was really nice to see that bit of city history recognized and celebrated in this way. And many city staff were involved in that project and working with community to make sure that story was told properly. So that's really a recognition, I think, for the Planning Commission, the City Council, for all of our staff who work these projects and try to produce a good result. So now I will shift to an update on the downtown park. And
Before we move on.
Yes.
Is that the kind of thing that we would announce as well, congratulating these businesses, issue some city congratulations to these businesses?
We certainly can. We have publicized these awards just through social media.
Okay.
Jim Snyder, who was our leader of the whole plan review process for both of these projects and for all of our projects in the city, was there at the event where this award was granted. And I think he's been very good about spreading the word of this recognition, because it's recognition for the developers, but I think it really is recognition for how this community does development and does it in a real community-based way.
it would just be nice to send even a congratulatory note to the
Yeah.
businesses at least.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And just one coda to that, two other businesses, Walter Phillips was recognized at this event, one of our local businesses, and LF Jennings was recognized at this event for a project that they're doing in Reston. So Falls Church was quite visible at this sort of year event that many in the capital region go to. So for an update on the downtown park, I have a graphic here that we're using to help tell the story of the park. And I want to just provide the City Council with an update. The Planning Commission got an update just last week, and the EDA, of course, has been the initiator and kind of driving spirit behind this project from the beginning. Before I provide some description of what is proposed currently, just by way of background, going back to 2015, 2016, the EDA saw that the council had approved the downtown area plan, which contained principles about design changes that we could make, investments we could make in the downtown area that would help activate that commercial district, that would help engage and connect our community. And they identified the park in particular as a place that could be activated and have events and be more of a gathering place than is currently the case. What's driving the whole effort is to provide support for our local businesses and really create more vibrancy in our downtown commercial district. In 2017, the design process began, and in December 2017, bids were received on the initial EDA desired plan for the site. Those bids came in significantly above budget. The EDA had allocated $550,000 of EDA funds to help pay to pay in full for these improvements. The EDA worked with their project manager, Kim Callahan, to go through redesigns to attempt to bring the project into budget. We did that redesign, got revised bids, and it was still significantly over budget. So in October of this year, the EDA did agree to cancel that design initiative and instead try a lower cost approach that would be one of the key things is to stay within the four corners of the original design for this plaza, which is ringed by a brick seating wall, and in the back a brick wall, which originally had lighting on the top of it. This park was an initiative of the Chamber of Commerce in 1966. And it received an award for design in 1966 from VPUS. And so this iteration is going to try to stay true to that original vision for the park and really simply update it, reinvest in the lighting for this park, and create a place that will be attractive, that will be welcoming, where various different activities can happen, and to do so at an affordable budget. So we're engaging community on this. We're talking with all the business owners and surrounding property owners. We've been briefing VPUS on it since they were one of the original groups that helped support this park, the Chamber of Commerce, and of course the EDA is since it is EDA funding for the project, is still overseeing it. This proposal was developed in-house by one of our planners, Akita Ruzzi. And what it stands for is to essentially keep one of the original trees, which is in good shape. There were 3 trees in this part of the park. If this is Broad Street, this part of the park had a holly tree, and sorry, I'm not sure exactly what kind of trees they were, but they were in bad health. So they have been removed by the city's arborist. And so we will then, over the course of this winter, carry out improvements to that park to try to accomplish the goals that were just described. We're working within a much smaller budget. The EDA has approved $100,000 for this project to date. Ms. Callahan, as our project manager, will continue to work on the design, and there will be ultimate cost estimates. There will be more than that amount that just cited, but before we put a number out there, we want to work through the program and then get estimates. The approach for the park this time really is to have it be very community-driven, to have this be something that the community, the business community, is involved in the design from the beginning, and have this be something that will be a source of positive energy for the business district and bring them into the design process. And so that work is underway. Jim Snyder has been talking with lots of the stakeholders on this, along with Kim Callahan. We'll do as much of it as we can in-house. For instance, the brick walkway that runs through the center of it, we will take out the step, which is not ADA compliant, and make it accessible. We'll improve the lighting. There's a lot of this work we can just do in-house. There are certain things we'll also try to do in partnership with other businesses, potentially Sisler Stone, Jeff Jeffries, who's one of the property owners there immediately to the right, and other businesses in the immediate area. So I think we're in a positive direction on this. The briefing for the Planning Commission was essentially the same briefing that I'm giving you tonight that Mr. Stoddard gave to the Planning Commission, but they also discussed process. And because this is really the spirit of this project is to try to go back to a lot of the key design elements that were part of the original park, and we won't be disturbing 2,500 square feet of soil or anything like that. It does not trigger a site plan. But nonetheless, we will keep the Planning Commission up to speed and try to keep all of our the key stakeholders involved in this as this design progresses. Our goal is to have the majority of the work done by this spring, and since we'll be doing it in-house, I think you'll see incremental progress as we proceed. I'd be happy to answer any questions about it.
Mr. Z.
Thank you, City Manager. I really approve of doing an upgrade to the area that is in keeping with our well-deserved reputation for frugality and excellent design at the same time. I would note those lights look like they were on sale at Costco for $59.99 on Black Friday. If you told me, I would have bought you some. I don't see the world famous backflow preventer that occupies a prominent location on the site. Is that through the magic of Photoshop, or is that actually going to be moved?
I think you might be referring to stuff that's in the actual tree planters that are front, so that's not pictured in this illustration at all.
Well, maybe I'm misspeaking. There's this big, ugly metal box.
I mean the transformer?
Yeah, it's a transformer.
Oh, there's a big transformer back there.
Yeah.
That is outside the bounds of the project. So I think that's an opportunity for beautification, but we will not be moving that transformer. That's back in the parking lot.
Well, maybe you can chrome plate it. Can't hide it. Thank you.
Other comments, Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The expense that we'll be going to now is going to be carried by the EDA. Is there any role that the council plays in, approving that, reviewing that?
The EDA, this has been an EDA initiative, so the initial budget allocation was made by the City Council. The City Council essentially received the EDA funds and then put it into the capital improvements program. So there is not a need for additional appropriations or other formal actions. But I think the goal is to keep everybody informed, and if there's input, we want to hear it.
So the public process will be as if we had a formal review responsibility and approval, but we actually will not have to exercise formal approval.
That is correct, and that was true for the original park as well.
Right. Okay. Just while I'm thinking about it, speaking of low-cost opportunities for improvement, in this block, and I think in a couple other blocks in the downtown area, there are some boxes, I guess they're called, that at some point in our past may have had periodicals in them, but which, according to my last survey, now are empty and are receptacles for trash. I wonder if we might ask the Public Works staff to just take an eyeball review of boxes that are arrayed in front of the CVS and in a couple of other locations in the first blocks of the downtown intersection, and have any that are empty and no longer in use removed. Some are still in use and have periodicals in them, but I'd say at least a third of them appear to be abandoned, and it would improve the looks of the downtown area generally if we could have those removed and no longer used as trash cans. Thank you.
Ms. Hardy?
Great. I love this plan. I think it's going to accomplish a lot of what the EDA originally set out to enliven the downtown. Two requests. One, I'm glad we're doing the stakeholder outreach and the communication. I would love to see more public-facing communication. I think a really easy step is just posting the plans that you're talking about tonight and just saying, coming soon, 2019. I think that gets the public a lot excited about seeing public dollars at work here. I think we're going to get a lot more eyeballs than social media. A second, which is really a primer for the next couple weeks' conversation, is really maintenance in the FY20 budget. So as we make investments in our downtown, I want to make sure that we also are following up with maintenance dollars. So this was done in 1966, and clearly it hasn't been maintained in the past 50 years. And so I want to make sure that we don't make that same mistake for the next 50 years, and that whatever we do now gets maintained, as well as all the other projects that we're doing downtown. So something to think about for the next two meetings. Thank you.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
So the murals on the side of the building there, is that conceptual at this point, or do we have agreements from the adjacent landholders to do something with that brick wall?
Conceptual.
Okay.
But I think there is agreement in concept that would be a good thing to do.
Make a big difference.
Yeah.
I think without that, it'll look a bit cavernous. So I don't know about that particular design. But in any event, yeah. It does look like an Eagle Scout project. A few ladders, buckets of paint, get creative. Okay.
Vice Mayor Connolly?
Thanks for that report, Mr. Shields, and thank you, Ms. Hardy, for requesting outward-facing public input or just public announcement. Even a sign in the park would be good. A little yard sign that says coming soon. I continue to wonder how much the EDA has spent thus far on this park. And I'm kind of frustrated that we didn't start with this to begin with, because it seems like the idea is right there, exactly what we want, and yet there were 3, maybe 4 years now we've been talking about this, and a lot of money has been spent on very extravagant plans that, City Council nodded our heads for and voted for. But in retrospect, looking back, I think the process, we would have been better served to say, how can we do this much more gently than what was put forth? I voted for it, but I think in retrospect, it makes sense to look back and say, those original plans, the landowners didn't love, and yet we forged ahead. And this one sounds like the landowner does love, so we should have looked at that more fully beforehand. So I just say that to all of us, that as we're looking at these kind of projects, I really feel like we need to, at the beginning, step back and say, how much are we willing to spend on this, and let's do it the right way. But I would like a detailed budget over those years of how much has actually been spent on this park.
I'll send council a report on that, and it was a significant amount of money, and it was a painful part, I think, of the EDA's decision-making process, because there had been sunk costs in the design, the engineering of the more ambitious plan, and it was not easy to walk away from that investment.
Right, and I know a lot of time and effort went into that. And then my other question is, does this park have a name?
We call it the Downtown Plaza,
Downtown
but we
Plaza.
could get more creative with the naming. And I think as people
Right.
view this as a place to go, that will be
Yes.
a good, and that'll be another desirable part of it.
So this was someone else's idea, and Letty just mentioned it to me too. We could name it the Hugh Brown Park, or the Mr. Brown's Park, or Brown's Park Plaza, or along. I don't know how that works, how that process works of naming a park, but it seems like an appropriate name.
I will just note, the city council does have an established policy for naming public facilities as adopted by a formal resolution, and I can circulate that.
All right, are there any other comments? If not, I've got a few, mostly echoing what my colleagues have said. One is, I do think we need to get beyond stakeholders, but just everybody. And we got a whole bunch of people here tonight, so in a moment I'm going to ask if anyone has any comment. But I do think it's important to get this out to the public as a whole. I love the idea of a mural. our murals. I think it really reflects our creative arts and cultural scene, and I think it'd be great to commission 1 or 2 murals in this park. I do think, though, there is benefit this is economic development. It's bringing people to our downtown, allowing people to want to spend more time in our downtown. We just had an event in this park that had, I don't know, 100, maybe even 200 people, and those people will go spend money and buy, coffee or whatever might be around. So I think these kind of public open spaces are really important to our downtown and our city's economic future. So I think we're off to a good start here, and I would encourage your continued effort, particularly as to public outreach. Unless there are any other comments, I want to offer the public a chance to speak, if you'd like, at this point. We normally don't speak at the public manager's comments, but given that this is the first blush of this, there hasn't been a lot of opportunity for public comment. If anyone would like to speak, you're certainly welcome to at this point. There ought to be more time going forward to make public comment, but anyone who will wish to are certainly welcome to make a comment at this time. All right, got a first taker. Welcome back.
Yes, Margaret Schwartz, 313 Lincoln Avenue. Just an idea that as part of the city's effort to promote this, I would suggest considering sponsoring a contest to have local artists submit their design for the mural. And that would garner a lot of publicity for the city, and we certainly would like to see a variety of options for the mural. So, and there should be plenty of time if you all want to act on doing something like that, to consider putting a contest out there. So,
It's a great idea. Thank you very much. Anyone else have any comment on this? All right, we're going to keep on moving, but there should be plenty of opportunities going forward, and Mr. Shields, I think, will be making more announcements as to when and the opportunities for people to comment and to have input on the park. Let's go ahead and move on then to business on the agenda. Madam Clerk, will you call the first item, which looks like it's essentially the consent agenda?
Yes, that's correct, and I think the city manager was going to handle those.
All right, Mr. Shields?
The first item on consent is resolution to adopt the 2020 funding recommendations for Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Program funds, and to authorize the city manager to enter into annual agreements with Arlington County and grantees to participate in these CDBG and home programs. The summary is provided in the staff report, and this reflects the recommendations of the Housing Commission. The second item on consent is 2 agreements relating to the Dual Trails project that the city is doing in partnership with the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority and the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority. The NVTA has awarded $3.2 million in funds for the Dual Trail project in Falls Church. It will be the pilot project to separate walking trails for cyclists and pedestrians in both directions. And so the first agreement is to accept the grant from the NVTA and have an agreement for the use of those funds. And the second is a memorandum of agreement with the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority for them to actually carry out the work on park property on the WNOD trail. Those are the 2 items on consent, and in addition, there are a series of appointments that have been through the appointment committee.
All right, so does anyone want to remove any item from the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I don't want to remove anything, but I noticed that Brenda Heffernan, our chair of our housing commissions, in the audience. I didn't know if she wanted to speak before we take a vote.
Sure, come on down.
Good evening. I'm Brenda Heffernan. I'm here on behalf of the City of Falls Church Housing Commission. We have 4
Sorry, your time's up.
Okay, well, this should be a no-brainer. I mean, we have 4 very worthy recipients of the federal funds that have been allocated to the City of Falls Church through the CDBG and home programs. This is a partnership agreement with Arlington County. Just to briefly highlight some of the things that these recipients will be doing. Number 1 through Mount Daniel, the Family Outreach Program, that is a homework tutoring and child care program that allows after-school tutoring, and then also provides childcare so that families, parents of children who attend Mount Daniel can take English as a second language classes. We have also a recipient, which is the Falls Church Community Services Council, that is to provide emergency rental and utility assistance for tenants who just need a sort of a one-time assistance with paying rent and utilities. The Falls Church Housing Commission, the Virginia Community Development Corporation is the third recipient, and they are proposing to replace 40 decks and railings at the Winter Hill Apartments. And lastly, we have the Homestretch program, which will provide rental assistance to families who are in transition from being homeless to actually renting property in the city.
All right, well, thank you very much for that report. It certainly adds much to what we had heard earlier. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you for your service to our community.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who would like to remove any item from the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I don't care to remove any items from the consent agenda, but just make a quick comment on the transportation project. I think it is unprecedented in establishing a dual trail. It will be hugely significant, not only from a transportation standpoint, but safety standpoint. And I think as one of the key members of our team on transportation issues would indicate, getting any money out of NVTA is a process, and it takes a while to do. So it's not insignificant that we were able to get this funded. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Anything else? Does any member of the public wish to speak to the consent agenda? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Mayor, move passage of all the items on the consent agenda.
Do we have a second? All right, we have a second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. And tonight's a bit unusual. We've had a regular meeting where we've taken some votes on things as we just did, but we're also going to have a work session. So we're moving to a work session, which is, maybe it's a distinction without a difference, but we're on to our work session portion of the evening. Madam Clerk, would you like to call the first
Sure.
item on the work session?
Sure. We have TO 18-12, an ordinance to amend Chapter 28, Weapons, Article 7 of the Code of the City of Falls Church to regulate the transportation of loaded rifles and shotguns and repeal outdated provisions.
All right, Mr. Shields, are you going to be doing the staff report?
Well, I'm going to defer to Ms. McCoskey and to Police Chief Gavin, who can provide the staff report.
So I'm going to begin and go through the ordinance and how we got here and what we're trying to accomplish. And then Chief Gavin's going to fill in anything that's left out and help with any responses. This item arose out of a council request that we utilize the authority in the state code to prohibit the transport in vehicles of loaded shotguns or rifles. And in developing a provision to use that authority, it became clear that much of our ordinance is remaining from when we had authority to have provisions, and much of it has been, in fact, invalidated by State Code 15.2915. And so as we reviewed this ordinance, we felt it was time to do a cleanup of these provisions. They can't be enforced today, and in fact, they are invalid. We have, however, most of the provisions, the substance of what they prohibit, is still prohibited under state code. And so really, this is effectively today, these provisions or these activities are prohibited under the state code, but we just can't enforce our local code. And we've prepared a chart that's on pages 2 to 3 of the staff report. And what it has in for those provisions which show as their status invalidated by the state code, you can see the state statutes that criminalize the same conduct. Some of them are actually pretty much verbatim what we have in our ordinance today, and some of them are slightly different language, but they govern the same conduct. So although it looks like much of our ordinance is being removed, and I think Chief Gavin can speak to this more, but this is how the ordinance is enforced, in fact, today, because the provisions that are being removed are those that are declared invalid by the state code and that we cannot enforce, but we have the ability to enforce the same conduct under state law. We also have a new provision on transporting loaded shotguns and firearms at section 190.1. We have a revised provision regarding the destruction of unclaimed weapons. And as we've heard tonight, a comment from some of the citizens that we should take out the language about allowing such weapons to be sold. And I think we can take a look at that and bring that back for first reading, a possible amendment to that language. And the provisions on pneumatic weapons, air guns, and all remain in the code, and they are authorized today. Finally, I wanted to note one other provision, which is in, it's section 28-191, which contained a number of exceptions to the rules. And it was raised, again, by our citizens who have been very actively involved in helping to get this ordinance drafted properly and in a way that's going to best protect our citizens. But it was raised that some of those provisions seemed a little bit as though they were inapplicable because they were exceptions to the rules about loaded shotguns and firearms, but they spoke about pistols. And upon a review of that, it appears that the exceptions that apply to these firearms and rifles and shotguns are in fact embedded within the new provision 28-190.1. And so I believe that we will also strike the entirety of section 28-191, which is exceptions to the rules, but I think that's no longer necessary. And again, we will bring that forward at first reading. So if there are any questions, or maybe Chief Gavin has some input to provide as well.
Thank you, Council, and particularly Ms. Hardy for bringing this forward, and Carol for taking it with Starling to this point. I'm always proud to stand with the moms, and they teach me something every day, with either through email or coming to the office and giving me some pep talks, which is wonderful. But just to give some flavor behind the purpose of this change to our ordinance. Any measure, any small measure, is a measure towards safety with weapons, and it allows officers to take certain steps to ensure safety. So I applaud you for that if we can get this through. In terms of Falls Church, when we get to the disposal of weapons, I wanted to speak specifically to that, to get an understanding so you understand how many weapons we do take off the street. In the past 5 years, we've taken off 75 weapons off the Falls Church streets. Of those weapons, hold 1 second, 47 of them have been destroyed. We do not sell weapons back into the community. 28 of those weapons were given back to the rightful owners after the disposition in court. There is a process in which when we do destroy weapons, that we have to seek permission from the Commonwealth Attorney's Office that they have no need for those weapons in any type of prosecution, and that we're able and capable of destroying them. But by no means have we ever sold weapons back into the community, and because it's under my authority, we will not under my authority. The only other thing that I would consider in this ordinance is you see down on line 517 through 519, in lieu of destroying any such unclaimed firearms, a locality may donate firearms to the Department of Forensic Science upon agreement of the department. And what that does, it actually allows us as the Department of Forensic Science for the state, it allows them to measure weapons, shoot weapons, and study weapons for prosecution. So it helps us. in the long run on gun violence, on prosecutions, helps commonwealths, it helps the police officers understanding the science of weapons. So there may be a case where we may not destroy the weapon, but we may donate it to the state lab for examination, only to be destroyed afterwards. But I would like to thank everybody that has done a lot of work, Carol and Starling, Miss Letty, the moms, and Eric, for helping me get to this point. But I would dare say each and every time that we take that small measure to control weapons, it gives an officer a leg up on asking the right questions. And that question might be the one that stops somebody from taking a gun a little further. What it also does, what this does in terms of cleaning up the ordinance, it allows for no confusion to officers. For a young officer on the street to look at state code and then look at our ordinances and see and try and measure which is right, it can be confusing. So to clean up our ordinances and is the right thing to do by your officers, the practitioners that are out there actually applying these laws on the street. So thank you. If there's any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for your service to our community. Are there any questions or comments from anyone? Mr. Snyder?
Mr. Mayor, since I think I was maybe the only city council member here when we had 26 gun-carrying people attend our city council meeting, I've had a strong dedication to this issue. I've also treated victims of gun violence as an EMT, so I have a strong commitment to this issue. And I want to thank you for your constant advocacy. I do want to ask some questions, though, about what we're doing and not doing, and ask why. And maybe the chief can be helpful, or maybe Carol can. My first question is, how do you define rifle? Does that include AR-15s and automatic assault-type weapons, either long guns or, and I understand that there are a lot of short-barreled automatic weapons. So my question is, how do we define rifle?
An AR-15 is going to be a long gun, a shotgun, a long gun, and a rifle. I don't know the exact length of barrel, which defines long gun, but I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, obviously, I want the scope of this ordinance to be as broad as possible, so I'm very interested in the definitions and whether we can expand the definition to include, for example, as we know, most gun violence is committed by handguns. We also know there's an incredible variety of handguns, everything from revolvers to semi-automatic and automatic pistols, and my question is, can we expand this ordinance to include those types of firearms? I also want to come back to the fundamental statistic. I think, Chief, as you know, far more gun violence is committed with handguns than it is with rifles. And so is there any possibility to further expand this ordinance to include as broad possible? That will be my request. How can we expand this ordinance, if at all possible, through definitions or elsewhere, to extend its reach to the maximum extent possible? So I don't expect necessarily answers tonight. And Chief, it's not directed to you particularly, but I think that would be helpful along with Carol. What can we do about some of these definitions here? Because, again, I want to reach the broadest category of firearms we possibly can. The second notion is that it only applies to loaded firearms and a very narrow category of firearms, as I said, rifles and shotguns. Is there any possibility we can extend that to the presence of the firearm rather than whether it's loaded or not? That would also be important. Next, the exceptions about reasonably believes that a loaded rifle or shotgun is necessary for his personal safety in the course of his employment or business. What does that mean, and what sort of an exception are we accepting here to our intent with regard to this ordinance? Has it been construed, and is it simply, well, I think I need it? Is that enough? Or is some degree of proof necessary? What do we really mean by that? The next question I have relates to all the exclusions from the city of from the city ordinance. Is it true that each and every provision that we're striking has a state counterpart that you police officers are capable of enforcing? So I want to make sure that we're not creating a situation where we eliminate it, but there is not a state statute that covers as well or better than our existing ordinance. Finally, I want to go back to the irony, the incredible irony here of maintaining broad exclusions for BB guns and permitting incredibly wide ownership and use of far deadlier weapons. I think the irony here is beyond comprehension. So I want to see if there isn't a way we can extend that section as well. Are we stuck with pneumatic guns, or could we apply it more broadly to firearms? So those are the questions. My intent is I want as broad legislative activity as we can possibly engage in and defend, and I want the exclusions as narrow as possible, and I want to make it as enforceable as possible by our police officers. So thanks a lot. These are some initial comments, and I look forward to making some others as we go along. And thanks again for the effort for bringing us this far. But again, I think you've heard what my intent here is. Thank you.
Other comments? Questions? Mr. Duncan?
Could I just ask one question to the chief? You said that you confiscated 75 weapons, so at least one a week. In 5 years?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
5 years.
No, still. Is it your impression that these are weapons confiscated from people who live in the city, or these folks passing through town, or is there any way of knowing that?
There's both. I've been on many a call where we have seized weapons from people that are residents in the city. And then, of course, then there are those that are passing through, DUI stops, drug stops, where we've made a traffic stop, found drugs and weapons. We've gone to the fire department one. At one call, I can remember specifically, went to a trouble unknown for someone not breathing. They felt like he was passed out and saw weapons all around the house that were not secured. Smart called us. We went in, and it was deemed very unsafe, and so we actually kept all of those weapons for safekeeping until such time a judge made us give them back. But there are quite a few weapons in the city.
Interesting. On the matter of pneumatic or air rifles, what we used to call air rifles when I was a kid, I remember when my son was growing up, we had a sort of just a rule that we were not buying anything that looked even remotely like a real weapon. We had some squirt guns and so forth. But what's your impression of how that lays now? My son's obviously all grown now, but do you feel like here in the city there's a general public awareness of the problem of these toy guns that look so much like real guns that in other jurisdictions they've resulted in incidents? Have we had any experience with that here?
Yes, we have. We've had 3 very serious incidents where kids or mid-teens were playing with or threatening people with what appeared to be real weapons. And when we got onto the scene, we're confronted with that scenario, which is very serious because, you can't tell at first blush if that's a real weapon or not. And I can think of 3 distinct instances where we were actually drawing down on somebody that had a toy gun. The pneumatic guns, we have had a couple instances where we've been called for people shooting at targets in their yard or not being supervised as it states it should be. But it's not overwhelming number, but I mean, when we have them, obviously it's very dangerous because it looks like a weapon, and then we're called, and then you introduce a real gun into that scenario with an officer, and that's always kind of risky.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean-
And so, but yeah, we do have that. Now, I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, collectively, the Northern Virginia Chiefs, and I'll have to look up the exact date, did a press release with
Yeah.
Fairfax City. I don't remember if you recall that, but it was led by Carl Pardini and myself and a couple other chiefs, and we actually did somewhat of a show of the weapons out there, particularly the toy weapons, and how they appear to be real, and the instances that we have had in the region with kids presenting weapons at the presence of police, and how that is such a dangerous scenario. We could revisit
Yeah, I'm
that.
glad you mentioned that. I think that was what was rattling around in my head just with the holiday season upon us now.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing, as far as I know, in state law that prohibits us from running a public relations campaign that would call attention to that as a danger. You know, here are toys that you can buy on the shelves that we suggest, if you're a responsible human being, you not purchase for your children. All of us, I think, up here share a desire to do more than the Commonwealth allows us to do, but there would be nothing that would prevent us from doing that, and that would be a good use of our social media, particularly, as I say, at a time when a lot of holiday purchases are being made, and maybe it's a good time for a reminder of that.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Ms. Hardy, then Mr. Lichtenhouse.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. So I shared a lot of Mr. Snyder's concerns about the cleanup of this. I think originally when I looked at the ordinance, my first reaction is, wow, we've struck like 2/3 of the ordinance. There's a lot of red line here. And so I think that's why I thought Carol did a really nice job outlining for every provision we struck where it was still enforced by state code. So I think that gives people comfort that we still enforce it. And I think in practice, hearing what happens in our police force is that officers still reference state code. That gives me comfort that in practice, nothing really changes, and it really just makes our ordinance more defensible and makes it up to date. So I think I feel good about that. As for the new part that we're adding in to take away the ability to transport loaded shotguns and long guns, I think I agree in general, it doesn't go as far. But I think my understanding from Carol, again, is that we are using every power we can. We can't take away the ability to transport loaded pistols. We can't take away the ability to transport any sort of guns at all. They have to be loaded shotguns and long rifles, because it is a provision that I think is added by the state for probably the more rural parts of Virginia for people who are hunting, which is why it's written that way. In general, though, I think we all want to do more, but I think this highlights the opportunity of how little power we actually have. And so I think this is a really important symbolic gesture for us as a locality to adopt every power that we get from Richmond and use this as an opportunity to show how little power we actually get, because I think our biggest tool at our disposal is actually the legislative action. I think this sets the stage for important legislative agenda that we'll, I guess, talk about next week, and really hope that General Assembly turns around and embraces stricter, more common sense gun legislation, because I think this is a great opportunity for us to go back to our delegate and our senator and say, gosh, we want to do more than what's in there, because look how little and pathetic it is. So, but thank you all for your work, and I appreciate hearing the concerns.
All right.
One more comment. I do want to make sure that we look at the public sale and disposal. So if we do have the ability from Richmond to actually match what's in practice with our code, let's make that happen. Because hearing Chief Gavin's kind of assertion that we don't sell any of these weapons, I think it's important to reflect that in our code. So if we have the ability from Richmond to actually reflect that in ordinance, let's do that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Chief, for your commitment to community safety above and beyond the day-to-day. Seeing you involved in things like this is, I think, reassuring to many. I do have a question related to the pneumatic. Does that include the airsoft guns?
Yes, I believe so.
It does?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the things that concerns me about those is just how realistic they look.
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily consider it a BB. I don't even know if it's considered a pellet, but those seem to carry the most realistic kind of looking firearms, where there could be confusion out on the streets for you guys.
Right. I mean, the immediacy of looking at that weapon and then seeing an orange tip that oftentimes can be altered is very, it's very real for our officers. I mean, it's a real threat. And I can count on, gratefully, in one hand, and where we have encountered young teens that are introducing that into a police call. And it's scary. We have also had those type of weapons used in real crime, because the criminal doesn't have a real gun. Not to say it's a good thing, it's just that's part of their practice. They don't have access to a real gun, so they use one of these replicas. that is a real concern to all of our officers. And I think that, again, like Mr. Duncan had said, we can revisit I guess that was the press release that we did a couple of years ago, and re-emphasize, particularly around Christmas time when people are purchasing these type of things for their kids. And also emphasize the fact that in our ordinance, with that particular portion of the ordinance, there is a parent piece, there's a supervision piece, and that's a responsibility of the parent to supervise youngsters that are practicing in their backyards or doing those type of things. And if they're not supervising those kids, they're responsible to that. And if the kid accidentally or shoots somebody or intentionally or unintentionally, then there's some type of measure to hold them accountable. So,
Mr. Z.
Thank you, Mayor. The provisions with regard to pneumatic and similar kinds of guns begins at 524, last page, section 28-202. Now, I'm wondering whether, in fact, since it's been provided that local jurisdictions can, the state code gives us local authority that what we have here that's proposed is, does that comport with other jurisdictions? Can we do more? Is it de minimis? Is it an appropriate level?
The state code provision allowing for this authority provides essentially exactly the same terms. This is something that's already in our ordinance, and it is exactly what's allowed under state code, so we've taken as much advantage as we can of our authority in that area.
Sure. So at line 526 under Pren A, it says, "It shall be unlawful for any person to shoot a pneumatic gun in any areas of this city." And then the next 30 lines give exclusions. Of course, the one that people have problems with, I guess, is at 530 to 540. It says you can basically fire them in your backyard or front yard, as long as you're doing it with reasonable care. Now, do we have a standard for reasonable care?
I think it's something that there are general definitions for under the law, but I'm not sure there's a bright line test we could find somewhere that would tell us exactly what it means in this situation.
I see. At line 553 to 555, it says basically anyone below the age of 16 can deploy these weapons, these devices, provided they're supervised. And what does supervision mean? Does that mean go out and have a good time?
Well, I think it's a similar type of thing that would have to be, and I can do some checking to see if there are, cases or something that have interpreted this, but I think that that it would be supervision with sort of reasonable care, that if the police found that the supervision was just allowing kids to do whatever they wanted, that wouldn't be supervision.
Yes, I would think not. I thank you for that. I have to say that my own personal experiences within the last year, I asked the police to come over to my house. A pneumatic weapon sounds just like a silenced .22. It makes the same kind of noise and probably has the same kind of effect. So I guess I'm kind of where I am, where Dave Schneider is. If we can do anything more that passes on the responsibility of discharge of these devices to the supervisor, that would be more to my satisfaction. Thank you.
I would think that under this portion of the code, it says violation of this section constitutes a Class 3 misdemeanor, right? Now, lack of supervision would be contributing to the delinquency of a minor, which is a Class 1 misdemeanor, which could accompany the violation if there was one, that caused some type of injury, damage, or violation.
Thank you, Chief.
Vice Mayor Connolly?
I just want to say thank you to Ms. McCoskey and Chief Gavin for getting all this together. When we first saw this, it did seem like we were eviscerating the whole ordinance, and did that make sense in our day and age? But the more I read it and the more I've been thinking about it for the last few months, it makes a lot of sense to sort of go back to basics. And this is what we can do, so this is what we're going to do. And as laws in Richmond change, we'll be able to add them right in. So I would ask our legislative committee to be alert and aware to any changes, so that as soon as we're able to make changes and update things with what happens in Richmond in the next few years, we're able to do it quickly here as well.
Yeah.
Since Vice Mayor mentioned the legislative committee, so is there like a model language that, in a perfect world, your organization or others like it could bring to us? I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the election a year from now, but let's just say that the winds changed, or not changed, let's say they blew harder. And you know, we're faced with a legislature a year from today, which is different from what it is now. I think our legislative committee would love to be at the forefront of having a model, you know, realistic. Let's, you know, try to make it something that would achieve bipartisan support from all regions of the Commonwealth, most regions, that we could begin working on this year, even if we knew it was not going to probably go anywhere this year, but what we could bring, you know, forthwith after next November's election.
I can tell you, sitting around the table with the moms, there's a lot of talk about language and how the little nuances of each and every ordinance, and how can we push it to make the measure stronger within the rules that we have here in Virginia. You know, we talk a lot about how is it that you can make, you know, go from long guns to pistols, and, you know, how is it that can you regulate this, and there's a lot of samples out there. I know that they have pushed a lot of examples to us for support in trying to get to Richmond and make change. So yes, there's a lot of there's a library of people out there that are willing to help.
All right, is anyone else, Mr. Snyder?
Mr. Mayor, on the legislative aspect, in addition to whatever we do on this local proposal, I'm wondering if we could look at a couple different options. One would be, what can we reasonably get done under the currently constituted General Assembly? And I think I know what the answer to that is. The second one would be what we could reasonably do under a differently constituted General Assembly, including what we can pull from other states that have been effective. You know, just like thoughts and prayers, I'm really tired of symbolism on this. Not that this is. I'm not saying that it is, but I really want to go after this. So I would be interested in what the best thinking is about what will be truly effective, and begin to construct what that would look like if the legislature changes over. And then finally, as a fallback, a local option. In other words, restoring back to us the ability to do things like prevent firearms in our libraries, and prevent firearms in our on our parks, prevent firearms in our city council chambers. So I think this legislative piece will be a very interesting one, which I'd very much like to work on with my other colleagues and the staff here, a series of options that we can use depending on various political circumstances. So anyway, that's the thought about the legislative approach. But so let me go back to one other question. So this provision on BB guns, pneumatic guns, and paintball guns is pretty broad. You can't fire one of these things unless you fall into the exceptions. Is that true of regular guns?
No.
No. So, in essence, we have an ordinance. I want to point this irony out. We have an ordinance that's stronger on BB guns, or the state permits us to have an ordinance that's stronger on BB guns than it is on real firearms. Yeah, okay. Unacceptable. Thank you.
Any other comments? First, I'd like to just make a few quick comments and thank Councilwoman Hardy for her leadership on this issue. Certainly, we're interested in doing all we can here on council, but I think, as you probably know, our hands are tied in many ways by our state legislature and what they allow us or don't allow us to do. And so, in a lot of ways, I think the actions in Richmond, frankly, and where a lot of efforts need to be applied. But there will be additional time to comment on this. I know a few of you spoke earlier today. There is going to be a first and second reading, so you all are welcome to come back out and have more time to speak. I think you've seen a sympathetic audience here for the message, but again, Richmond, I think, is where a lot of the rubber is going to meet the road. So anyway, thank you all for coming out. I'm not sure there's anything more to be said on this particular item at this point. Thank you, Chief, for your work, and thank our moms and dad for your efforts as well. So we do have a few minor things to take care of. We're near the end of our meeting. Is there any business not on the agenda that anyone would like to discuss tonight? Any standing regional or council liaison reports? All right, any council member requests?
Just a note to remind everybody who's involved with the Economic Development Committee that we're going to try to meet on Friday, December 7th.
A day that will live in infamy.
Right, exactly, to review the accomplishments of the past year and anticipate what comes ahead, and also to talk about the vacancy rate in some of the existing shopping centers across town and other matters.
All right, so I don't think there are any minutes to approve. Yeah, of course.
I just want to make sure everyone's seeing the announcement of a League of Women Voters event on Sunday afternoon, December 2nd. It's at Mary Ellen Henderson Middle School, and it's about school safety and security. So Chief Gavin will be speaking, as well as the superintendent, and Matt Hills, the principal of George Mason High School, and a few others talking about safety and security.
All right.
Mr. Manager, are we still planning a Sunday series on the 9th of December?
We are indeed, or at least that's my recollection. Mr. Shields, the 9th, 2 p.m.?
Council, I've been working with the development team, and we're thinking the 16th.
Okay.
The 16th is the third Sunday, so that would be in keeping with the tradition we've had. And so unless there's any objection to that date, that would be the date we'd go with.
Okay. All right, so we do have a closed session tonight, so everyone keep that in mind. It may have slipped your mind that indeed we do have one, but so what we're going to do, if we can, I guess, is go in a closed session on camera and then pull down the cameras and then take a short break and come back into closed session. So I'm going to go ahead and read a motion to get us into closed session. Upon a motion made by council member
Connolly.
and seconded by council member
Duncan?
and passed by a vote of City Council, council went in a closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A3 for discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the city. This is the Fellows property. Council member Connolly.
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yeah.
Snyder?
Yes.
Z?
Yes.
Tarter? Yep. Okay, let's take a short break and let the cameras come down and come into closed session. Upon a motion made by council member,
Duncan?
seconded by council member,
Lichtenhouse.
all right, and passed by a vote of City Council, council reconvened in open session. Councilperson member Connolly.
Yes.
Duncan.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Lichtenhouse.
Yes.
Snyder. Z.
Yes.
Tartar, yep. It is
26.
9:26. This is our certification upon a motion made by council member
Duncan.
and seconded by council member
Litkenhouse.
and passed upon affirmative roll call vote in open session. It was certified that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting were convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session or meeting by the city council. Council member Connolly.
Yes.
Duncan.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Lichtenhouse.
Yes.
Snyder.
Yes.
Z.
Yes.
Tartar. Yep. All right. What else do we need to talk about tonight?
Let's get out of here, Mayor.
Sounds
Move
like
to
a plan.
adjourn.
All right, let's do it. Let's go. Good day.